you. All right. And what's your name?
Calvin.
Calvin. All right. Our goal is to make sure Calvin is not stuck hunched over at any point. It's fully in a room before we get started talking. Thank you, Calvin. All right. So before we head in, I do like to give a bit of historical context going into the cave. So back in the 1880s, a lot of miners were coming through this area looking for gold along Osceola or other places along the Snake Valley. Now, when they were coming through, would have been even more remote than it is today. So some people did set up ranches or orchards for people coming through as places for them to get food and also places for people to stay as well. So there's one gentleman by the name of Absalom Lehman who back in the 1880s did set up a cattle ranch just down the way here, and that orchard that's in front of the visitor center does include some of his original fruit trees as well. Now the reason Ab Lehman set up down here in a very rural part of Nevada was he himself had been a miner, though not a successful one. So he kind of figured if I can't be great as a miner, I'll be great for my fellow miners, and allowed anybody coming through some food and a place to stay and a friendly face on their travels here. Now he was a cattle rancher specifically, and as cattle are sometimes wont to do, they'll wander off. And in 1885, he did notice that one of his cattle was missing. So he spent all day roaming up this area on his horse, looking for his cattle. And by lunchtime, he still hadn't found it, so he figured it might as well be a great time to take a break and eat his sandwich. So he set his sandwich down on a rock and turned to tie up his horse. However, as he turned to tie up his horse, he heard a sandwich run off behind him. Now, sandwiches don't have legs, so he turned around and saw a pack rat stealing his hard-earned sandwich. Now, he was hot, he was hungry, he was not going to let that sandwich go, so he hopped right back on his horse and took off after this pack rat. Unfortunately for Ab Lehman, very soon after galloping after this pack rat, it went down a hole. Yeah, exactly. It went down this hole, and since he did not have time to pull up or turn away, he and his horse also went down that hole. Thankfully, Ab Lehman was a quick thinker, grabbed the rope from his saddle horn, wrapped it around a nearby tree. As he and his horse descended into that hole, he was able to hold them up for 2 whole days until help arrived. If that sounds like a bit of a tall tale, you would be correct. That was one of the stories that he told a local newspaper here, though, to kind of catch people's interest into the cave, get them interested in continuing their reading to learn about some of the cave formations he found when he came into this cave. Now, the natural entrance is just a hole in the ground. If you go up this hill here, you'll see the back gate that we have in place now. There's a hole in the ground. Early visitors would have had to go all the way up these stairs, up this hill, and then down a whole bunch of stairs just to enter the cave. But we're lucky enough we have this nice little entrance tunnel here that we can go down instead to kind of bypass having to do all that. Now, it is an airlock. It is our way of minimizing how much unnatural air we let into and out of this cave. So we're going to go through this first door, but we'll pause at the second door, and I'll open it for you to head in fully. But if you have your jackets, now might be the time to put them.
Well, this one's just a smell.
You're not going to be hurting anything by touching these walls here. This was built in the 1930s as a way to bypass coming down the natural entrance. But go ahead and touch these walls here, get your touching out. If after this point you feel the need to touch anything, go ahead and use your pockets. I know I sometimes have to use them, so you're not alone in using your pockets. If you do not have pockets though, go ahead and use your armpits, kind of anything to kind of stop your hands from reaching out for the cave. Because after this point, if you touch any of the walls, you are hurting the cave. So do your best not to touch anything. Now, we will be passing the natural entrance on our way to the Gothic Palace. If you, once we go through this first little hallway bit, if you look up and to your right where it kind of opens up a little bit, you'll see light from the surface coming through. We ask you to be quiet and respectful when passing there for a very big reason. Some bats use Lehman Caves as a maternity ward. So Townsend figured bats, the mothers and their pups are up there currently resting. So I don't know about you, but I don't like it when a group of 20 come tromping through my room in the middle of the night. So we're going to give them the same respect. And then don't shine any lights up there either, because they don't like light shining in their eyes, same as we don't either. So be quiet and respectful when walking past. And then right around where the handrail starts at the Gothic Palace, if you again look up and to your right in that alcove there, you'll see some remnant stairs from when we did use a natural entrance as our way to get in. So yes, again, after this point, you may not touch anything, so go ahead and use your pockets if you need to. We're heading in now.
Wow, this is beautiful. Yeah.
These are the walks in the cave that we saw in there.
Yeah. And we will see if there is any cave bear there. Okay. Yeah. Wow, this is beautiful. See, Chakre? See? Oh, wow. They're so beautiful. Some see the icicles. Wow. Look, see. This is so beautiful. Wow. Look at that one. It's so... Wow. See?
Put your white on your...
You like it, darling? Yeah, this is the cave, okay? See?
It's bigger than any cave.
Yeah, this
You're
is
welcome to
bigger
go ahead
than...
and just keep filling in so that everybody can fit comfortably in here.
Yeah. Oh, look at that one. Wow, it's beautiful. See the icicles hanging? Look at that. Look at
Welcome
Do you see?
everybody to the Gothic Palace.
Oh,
It's so named
This is
because you
the
get formations
Gothic
like
Palace.
this here that look a little bit like Gothic architecture. Now, in order to get these cave formations, you did have to have the right environment to create them. So even though we just came from a dry desert environment, about 550 million years ago, we were in fact under a warm, shallow sea close to the equator. Now, in that warm, shallow sea, you had sea creatures that lived and died. When they died, their bones settled to the bottom of the ocean and built up over thousands of millions of years to press together into a limestone. Now, we're no longer near the equator, so eventually that limestone did move to where we are today. And as we moved, that limestone stretched nice and thin, which put it under a lot of pressure, and also put it under a lot of heat because it was very close to the Earth's core. Now, under that heat and pressure, it transformed that limestone into this marble that we have around us here today. Now, I don't know about you, but I wouldn't necessarily put this in my kitchen or my bathroom, but this marble was very important to the formation of this cave. Marble and limestone both break down in acid because of the bones that they're made up of. If you've ever seen an old limestone gravestone, you'll have seen the words kind of worn away. That's because rainwater is naturally a little bit acidic, and so it breaks down in acid. Now our cave first formed from the bottom up, with sulfur rising through the bottom, mixing with our high water table to create sulfuric acid, the bubble trail, and that's evidence of the sulfur coming up and eating away at our cave. Eventually that sulfur stopped coming in and the water table went back down, and our cave shifted to being formed from the top down instead, which is how it still forms to this day. Now if you don't know, the Great Basin is essentially a giant sink, which means any water that comes in here stays here. It does not go out into any oceans or outside waterways. So the two ways that water moves is through evaporation or sinking into the ground. And as the water sinks into the ground here, it helps create this cave. But eventually they'll plug up and the water starts flowing along the outside and starts creating these cave formations that you'll see all along the ceiling here that we call stalactites, which you can remember because they hang tight to the ceiling. And if I flip back to these ones, you'll see some water droplets hanging onto the very bottoms here. Those water droplets might fall to the ground and start creating these cave formations on either side of me. And then also behind you here, about where the handrail ends. And those are called stalagmites, which you might trip over, so do be careful when you're walking to the rose trellis room later. Stalactites are always growing down, and stalagmites are always growing up towards those stalactites. And eventually they might meet in a cave formation like this one here, or this extra fancy one to my right here. And what might we call them? A column. Just a cave joke for your morning here. Now those are kind of the most common cave formations that you'll see in a cave formed with mineral deposition like Lehman Caves, but there are a few more that I'll show you before we leave today. Now, while these were forming, they did not happen overnight. They in fact took millions of years to form. And while they were forming, we did not have these nice lights that you see behind us here. Those are for our benefit. And in fact, when I turn the lights off and at the end of the day, the cave is back to its natural state of complete darkness. So if it's all right with all of you, I'll turn the lights off here so we can experience just how dark the cave can get. If anybody does have any issues with the darkness, go ahead and let me know now. If you discover you have issues with the darkness, I have easy access to my flashlights and to the light, the switches. I can easily turn the lights back on. We won't be in darkness for too long, but just want to give people the option. Everybody all right for me to turn the lights off?
Yes, yes.
All right. So if you have any technology, like a phone, a camera, a watch, anything like that, make sure the screen is off and dark. So what I'm pointing out here as people are walking in is this little dirt patch. It's what's called a pack rat midden or a pack rat nest. And that's what this little thing is right here. You're welcome to keep going, coming into this room. So that everybody can fit in, no problem. For those of you coming in, what I'm pointing out is what's called a pack rat midden, this little dirt patch. Fancy word for a pack rat nest.
Okay. See, check it. So the cave.
If the rest of the group could continue
So when the bear
through.
comes, it will just go inside. And there may be some, animals may be there. But the animals here are harmless, okay? They will just hide inside also. So there is something like inside. See the icicle? Oh, see? This, we never used to see something like that.
Calvin, you comfortable? Yeah. Awesome. All right, so what I'm pointing out here is pack rat midden. It's a fancy word for a pack rat nest, but it's just this little dirt patch right here. I find them really cool because pack rats pass them down from generation to generation, which means they can be thousands of years old. And that means that you can find vegetation and bones from organisms that no longer live here, but we know once were because we have found them in a fortunately or fortunately, depending on the fact. We don't have any pack rats left in this cave. We know they were once here because we have their midden, but they're not here anymore. And that's in large part due to the fact that Lehman and other people who managed the cave after him come in, insects have fly and inspect me in the face sometimes during tours. But it did mean that pack rats can't come back in. They're not flying, they're rats. And there's a slight overhang of concrete right where that back gate is sitting, and they can't climb upside down. So at this point in time, pack rats are unable to come into this cave, though they can be found in other places around Great Basin. Now, so that's one human impact we can very clearly see in this room. Another one are these broken stalactites. Now, the reason for these broken stalactites are because Lehman had a policy, or if you could break it, you could take it. So that explains why some are broken. Thankfully, not as much breakage as you would expect from having that policy, but still a decent amount, and it's pretty obvious here. And caves don't always grow back. So here you can see there's no new growth on this stalactite, no water dripping, no soda straw growing. Although there is some in this area, you can see this water droplet forming here.
That's okay.
And then up here, you'll see some soda straws coming off these broken stalactites up here. Now, does anybody want to give me a guess for how old they think these soda straws here coming off these broken stalactites are? A million? 100? Any other guesses?
10,000?
10,000? It's about 100 at most.
Oh.
Yeah. So, good idea, thinking it takes a long time for them to form, but this little 1-inch piece is at most 100 years old, because in 1922, the Forest Service took over and made it illegal to break off any pieces of the cave. So, if that piece is about 100, you can imagine this one behind us might be a couple thousand, a couple million.
So this tiny one, I think this is the new one?
Yeah, so that's a broken stalactite, and it has a little new soda straw forming right there. Exactly. Now, something else I like to joke is that all cavers get their sandwiches stolen by pack rats. So if you look around you here, you'll see these kind of speckly things on the wall, like that. And if you had to give it a food name, what might you give it? Cauliflower is one. Maybe like a movie snack.
Popcorn.
Popcorn.
Popcorns.
Yeah. So we call these
like
cave
popcorns.
popcorn. That's
Cave
just
popcorn.
one of the secret
Wow.
we have in here.
They are like shark
And
teeth.
you'll kind of see it all over. They form when water kind of splashes down.
Yeah,
and
alligator
splatters
teeth is
onto the
really.
wall as it's just dripping down.
Or smaller than shark.
Yeah.
And something else that forms in here, so we've talked about regular stalactites, but if you look back here, you'll kind of see these kind of crazy looking formations. These are called stalactites, which are when water's put under pressure, and so instead of dripping straight down to kind of shoot out at crazy angles, you can kind of think of it as if you get a hole in your garden hose, you cover up the top, and the water just kind of sprays out at whatever angle it wants. That's kind of what happens here. They kind of just shoot out wherever they want. Now those are all really cool, impressive formations, but the most impressive, in my opinion, in Lehman Caves is this right up here. It's not the stalactites themselves, but what they're hanging off of is this really flat piece hanging down from the ceiling. And this is what we call a cave shield. Most caves, if they can even claim to have cave shields, they can count them all up on their fingers. If they're lucky, they can also start counting on their toes. But Lehman Caves, which is only about 2 miles long, can account for just over 500 cave shields here. So I'll let you guys, we're going to walk back to the Gothic Palace. We're in the Rose Trellis room now. Walk back to the Gothic Palace. You're welcome to take pictures in there. You have about 5 minutes or so. We are going to all walk back that way just so we're all
we are
in
going
one
back.
spot. And then when we leave, I'll...
Look at that. We are going through the cave. Can you imagine? It's so beautiful. Yeah, this is the biggest cave I have ever seen. Oh, this is up here.
It's like a
Yes, I am.
jacket.
Yes, Lodi. Yeah, it is a man with a jacket. Oh, wow.
I saw a walk up and I saw a guy.
Yeah.
A hole.
Yes, it's a tiny cave right there. Wow. Don't you glad we came? Yeah, we'll wait for that ready to come then.